I want to introduce to you guys one half of the Biz Bros, and I brought him on because this is Lewis, and I wanted you guys first to get to know him because he's friggin' amazing. He and his brother run an awesome show that you guys need to check out. When you want to see how a live show can truly serve your audience, position yourself as the expert, and start to drive customers to you, you have to look at the show that the Biz Bros are putting on. All the links will be down below. If they're not, if you're watching this live, just comment below. I will make sure I get those links to you guys. So without further ado, let's just dive straight into my conversation with my favorite half of the Biz Bros, where we just straight up dive into talking about his show. Hey, tell us about your show.
About the show? Sounds good. So yeah, we have this show called Contents Profit. You might or might not have heard of it, but we started it right at the beginning of the pandemic, which is insane. So it was like our last resource to save our business, our struggling business at the time. We lost about like 80% of our clients at the time because we had a lot of small businesses. Let's see this camera. Boom, boom, boom. There we go. Sometimes I merged with the wall, but anyway, so we lost about 80% of our business at the time, and we had like 2 months worth of runway. It was just me and my brother at the time. We were freelancing, and we're like, hey, every single person, our coach, every single one, they said like, you guys should have a platform. You guys should have some kind of a show, some kind of a podcast, YouTube channel, anything. Like just create, right? And at the time, we already like crushed like 245 lives, which is our internal personal, content creation challenge. That we also have like a public version of it, which is awesome. But we're like, okay, we did this live. Why don't we translate this into a podcast show or a show or something, our platform? Like we didn't really know what it was. And then we decided to launch it. So March 15th, 2020 was actually the first episode. I think we're like past episode 240 right now, which is insane. So the commitment was, let's do 3 live shows a week. Why? To speed up the process. We're like, okay, it's a numbers game at that point. It's like, okay, if we want to accelerate our learning and our learning curve on how to produce a show like this, we got to do it repeatedly, right? So every day was kind of crazy for like a 1-hour show. And so we decided 3 times a week. We had a client at the time that was producing 3 times a week as well. And we're like, okay, we gotta do this. So after 20 episodes or so, it was just me and my brother. We ran out of things to say. We're like, so, okay, now what? What are we actually going to do? So either we need to learn more, right? Or either we need to like start doing a little bit more research. We cannot just go off the cuff at that time. So we started interviewing a lot of people. And right after that, we started creating these incredible connections. And in about 3 weeks, we were able to recover everything that we lost in like sales wise. And then in about 6 months, we double like everything sales, and our team scaled from just us to about 6 people that we currently have as team members, which is incredible, right? So, and then out of that, a version of our service evolved, a version of our service got better. We started serving people. We launched the public challenge. The first time that we did it, we had about 100 people in there, which was insane. So the whole business really shifted and changed and evolved and got better because of the Contents Profit show. We often say like, hey, if worst case scenario happens, right, the last thing to go is the show. So it's been a fun journey over this like 240 something episodes.
That is absolutely incredible, and it speaks to your level of consistency. And people feel overwhelmed when they're thinking about starting a show, and they think, "Oh, I have to produce every single day a new piece of content, a new master core piece of content that's going to serve my people."
Yeah.
And that's really overwhelming. So you picked a schedule. I love that. So those of you guys listening at home, pick your schedule. 3 days a week, fantastic. If you want to ramp that up later on, perfect. But start with something you can be consistent with. Tell us more about that 45-day live, because that is something that I did with you guys. And it's something I do internally with my team. And I think it's super powerful. Tell us about
absolutely. So this was like probably 6 or 7 months before we actually started the show. Fonzie is my fact checker, so he's not here today. But basically, we were in this meeting and we were selling our service at the time to about 8 business owners, right? And we were sitting in this table and we're pitching the whole thing, and we're like, hey, and we had this amazing case study with a network of 8 different like fitness studios, and we're like showing the results, and it's part of it is what we do now as an agency. And we're like, look at everything and the retention and the attrition and all these like fancy like numbers, right? And all owners sat there and they're very politely be like, oh, this is so awesome, like thank you so much. And then this one guy stands up and he's like, okay, I get it, but where is your stuff? Like, where's your content, right? And at the time, we weren't producing anything internally because it was just me and my brother. We were freelancing, so like we were busy executing and doing that for other clients. So a lot of service providers that start that way, we relate because we've been there, right? Like we're like, okay, I have limited resources, which is my skills, my time. So, and those are assigned to work on my clients. So then I'm exhausted mentally and physically to then try to figure out what my own content strategy is, right? And that was the reason we weren't producing anything. We were like, okay, we're just going to do this for our clients. And we're like literally silence. We only had a sales page. Our only presence was a sales page. And we have to put it out there in the world. But it was like, it started with a pen, and it was like this sales letter that I wrote, like it's gold. And we call it the 6-figure sales letter because we actually sold more than 6 figures with that website out there, even though it wasn't related with anything that we did. So there's another story on that. But anyway, so we're like, okay, we came out of that meeting with no deals, right? Even though the feedback was very positive because of what that guy said, right? And maybe today I would have answered a little bit different, but at the time it felt like a gut punch. It was like, oh my gosh, we need to figure this out. So we sat down the next day and we're like, okay, how can we create anything consistently, right? Because in our heads, we're like, okay, we need highly produced videos because Fonzie is really good at highly produced videos. Like that's how we were known, the video guys, right? Like we invested in these cameras and we will go out to big corporate events and we'll record these videos, right? And but that was a lot of friction because then we had to edit the videos and we had to produce them and we had to do all this stuff, right? So that's why they weren't getting done. So we identified the friction points, which was the quality, right? The editing time that we didn't have. So it was constrained on those resources. So we're like, okay, we just came out of a challenge called 75 Hard by Andy Frisella, which was a physical challenge. It was insane. It was 75 days of 2 workouts a day, right? And we finished it. We crushed it, right? And we're like, wow, that really created a dent in our life. It created new habits. It created like very positive momentum. How can we replicate that in content? So we're like, okay, let's look at what's out there. So we saw like 7-day challenges, 5-day challenges, even 30-day challenges. And we're like, okay, well, that's all. Like, I personally don't want to do that. That doesn't sound exciting enough, I guess. It was like, okay, well, 5 days and then what, right? Probably an upsell, right? Probably they'll sell you something, right? Or, 7 days and then what? Like, I stopped producing. And me, my past is studio manager. I used to run fitness studios. I had a network of about 10 studios, and every single manager was so busy with their day-to-day operations that they didn't have time to create anything. So I'm like, okay, probably a small business owner, which was our client at the time, doesn't have time to do this. So let's put ourselves in that position. So we're like, okay, this is the rules. We got to produce content for 45 days in a row. Why 45 days? It just sounds awesome, right? It just sounds awesome. There's no scientific reason behind 45 days. It's just that it sounds awesome and it looks great on a t-shirt. So we're like, okay, 45 days and we have to produce no matter what. So that's how it started. And it was a commitment to ourselves to create. What happened after was incredible, right? After 15 days of producing content daily, and it was literally, we jump on with the least amount of friction possible on a phone. In my case, Fonzie added a little bit more friction. He wanted to like make it pretty for Instagram Live or whatever. But I was like, literally, I'm going to publish this on Facebook and I'm going to put it on LinkedIn and that's it. And the videos were less than 10 minutes. In about 15 days, we got a phone call of somebody that has been watching, never commented, never engaged, never did nothing. And he's like, hey, I've seen what you guys are doing. I love what you guys are talking about. Let's meet up. And that resulted in our first like $80,000 like deal, which was like, what? It was the most amount of money that we've ever seen in our lives, right? And we were able to work with that company for over a year. We built their internal team because they transitioned to that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what a great opportunity, right? So we stopped after 15 days. We didn't actually complete the whole 45 live. And then we did a version 2. There's a whole story after that. But that's the beginning of the challenge.
Oh, I love it. So building accountability in it. So finding your partner if you're going to do a show with a partner, if that helps you out, guys. If it's stacking up guests ahead of time so that you are committed to the experts you're bringing onto your show. Whatever it is that helps you stay consistent, that's going to keep you creating content, and by doing that, that's how you're going to get noticed by people. That's how you get those magic phone calls, which I have had a couple in my life as well, and they are
That's so
beautiful.
yeah.
Beautiful. Even if that magic phone call doesn't actually start with an $80,000 offer from a client, but instead is that first subscriber or that first follower or that next follower. That's how you're going to get recognized. That's the secret of organic content marketing, my friends.
That is
So
right.
tell us about how constantly creating this kind of content has helped serve your community. So we've talked about bringing new people in, but what about
Yeah.
the people who are already in your environment? How does your show also serve them?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's actually a challenge that we're like trying to solve right now, right? Because when we started, we are like, okay, we're in this like very urgent need of money. So that like the whole effort was like, okay, who's closest to cash that we can serve, right? So that was the focus. And then as we started getting more resources, we're like, okay, now with these resources, call it money, right? We can now go higher. And then so we free a little bit of our time. The team, we have a whole production team now, right? So we handle everything else. And we're like, okay, as we started happening, we didn't really start noticing like an audience until like past episode 100, 100
Yeah.
something, right? And we're like, oh, there's people actually sending us DMs. There's actually people out there. And like we literally didn't see any data, like podcast
Yeah.
wise or show wise, in about 6 months because the sole focus was like, okay, we need to produce it, right? Because if it's not out there, there's nothing that comes after. I mean, the consistency is the mother of everything, right? Like if we have to put it out there. So that was the sole focus. Once we master the consistency with those elements that you mentioned, for example, hey, let's schedule everything ahead. Like let's make sure that we have people lined up. The fact that we do it live, we do it live for us. There's no other like secret, algorithm secret. No, it was just for us because we perform better live, right? I'd rather do that than record it. And we just get it out of the way as well. Like we're like, okay, we don't have to produce it. We actually do everything live, all the transitions, all the promos, all the intros, everything is live because we identify that that's a huge friction point for us and it's helped the team a lot, right? So identifying those things. Now, about episode 100 or so, we're like, okay, there's actually people sending us the messages. Let's start the conversation. So now a lot of the things that they wanted was, okay, where can we gather? Like, if I'm not at the high ticket that you guys sell, how can you guys help me, right? And we're like, okay, now we have to build something for them. And that's when the 45 live first challenge was born, in an attempt to bring that community inside of, in our case, a Facebook group. So now what's happening is like, okay, more people are interested, and we're like, okay, because our focus as a company has been on the high end, we're like, well, here's our resource, here's the thing, here's like for free, like take it, like do it, implement it. But now people keep asking for more. They're like, well, what else? And then so we launched a workshop. It was like a whole Saturday workshop. It was incredible. We had a great feedback, right? Okay, what next? So content wise, we're like, okay, we're currently building that journey inside of the community because they deserve a little bit different than just the show. The show is streamed for them as well because it's incredible resources. The entrepreneurs that come are incredible. But at the same time, it's like they come in with certain problems, certain things. So over the last month, we've been jumping on calls nonstop to find out what those issues are. At the end of the day, is a lot of consistency, a lot of production questions, right? A lot of mindset questions, because when you start putting your thoughts into words, that you go through a transformation yourself, right? It's not easy for a lot of people to do this. For me, I guess, because I'm an extrovert, I think it was a little bit more easy or a little easier. My English is not very good looking today. A little bit easier to jump on a camera, right? I'd rather do that than write. My brother, for example, loves to write. So he'll do that and then jump on the camera, right? So we got to discover what is my internal framework so I can actually create, right? Because every company today, small business, solopreneur, anything, you have to have a content, a media side of it, because that becomes your asset when you go to, if you're an employee of somebody, that becomes your asset when you go to interviews, right? If you're a small business owner, that becomes your asset because you can create leads, build relationships, right? If you're a big business owner, a company, right, you got to control your message. You got to make sure that you control what's going out. So, okay, how do we actually create those frameworks? And that's what we're currently working on.
Ooh. So listening to your people is an absolutely essential skill when you're building these connections. And it's so cool. You actually jump on calls with people, and that's you're not the first person who said that. There's been a couple of people who build it into their process to have these moments of contact with their people,
Yeah.
whether they've just purchased a product or they've just opted into an email list. Getting them on that call, even if it's a no pressure, no sales call, I just want to bond with you. I just
Yeah.
want to get to know you. That's yeah, I like that. What have you found from like any like crazy insights that you've gotten from these calls?
Yeah, that our assumptions were completely off. And it was funny because we in our heads, right? Like we're so in it, right? Like we're doing this day in, day out. We're helping people at I guess a little bit of a higher level, right? When we manage different teams, and it's like, okay, they already conquered some of these baselines things that when the audience comes in, these are people that are looking for information, or I'm quoting, like air quoting, hacks, right? Like, and we hate anything that comes with hack. Is all about like your consistency, how can you make it your own, right? So in our heads it was a lot about on the sales side, on like all this stuff, which is really important, right? But the questions that we were getting was more of like, how do I actually get it out? So they were like 2-3
Yeah.
steps behind the sales, because if that consistency, we talked about this, is not there. And it was a very specific moment. We were actually at an event and we're walking back to our hotel room, and this person we were like walking next to like a cafe, right? And we see this guy, he looks at us and he stands and he starts walking like parallel to us, and we're like, oh my gosh. And we start like walking a little bit faster, and we're like, what's happening? And that person like cuts us off, right? And we're like, we stand and we're like, what's going on? And the guy's like, oh my gosh, you guys are the Luises, right? Like the Luis brothers. And we're like, yeah, dude, I love your show. And we're like, oh man, thank you. And he's like, and it was like probably the first time that we were recognized out in the wild, right? So it was like pretty like surreal for us. And but this guy, we start chatting with him, and it turns out his name is Jeff, right? And he lives in our city, right? And we were in a whole different location. And we start talking, and he's launching this incredible book that he wrote for his kid, right? And I was like, oh, this is a great opportunity. So we actually sat down with him and we're like, okay, Jeff, we have a couple questions for you, right? Why do you listen to the show? Like, what are some of the issues that you come? Like, why are you interested in the show? Why are you interested in the topic? Why are you interested in what we do? Why are you in the community, right? So all these questions led to, in his case, a lot of like baseline production side of things, where like, how can I actually be consistent with the tools and the resources that I have, which if I go back is when we started 45 Live. We're like, oh, okay, that's where it is. So that interaction that lasted about 2 hours, we're like, we need to do this. And as soon as we got back in town, we started sending DMs to people that have been in the email list, people that have purchased, the high-end clients. So we were able to collect this massive array of like objections, problems, things that they were doing, like that was happening right off the bat. And it was completely different of what we thought it was. So that gave us a lot of insight. And what was cool is that each one of these calls, right, we put a container. We were okay, these are 30 minutes, right? And then we will offer, hey, let's continue to do this because it's super valuable for us as well. And as a thank you, we'll help. And the value that they got, the value that we got, it was incredible. And now the relationship is a lot higher. And every single person is like, hey, whenever you have this ready, send me a DM. I'm down. Right. And he's like, okay, look, I wasn't even trying to sell. I'm like, I just trying to find out how can we serve you more. And I feel like a lot of people are really scared of that. I'll give you another example. We were consulting with a fitness, is a national fitness franchise. And they have several locations in here. So we went in to help with a couple of their studios, right? And one of the first things that we asked them is like, hey, let's go out after some of the members. You have, 200, 300 members in your locations. Let's go ask them what they want, right? The business owners of those studios, or the owners of those studios, were petrified to go ask these questions, right? It's like, hey, they're going to uncover all these things. I'm like, that's perfect. This is exactly what we need to uncover, because if we solve these problems, right? How does that translate? It translates into them staying more months, into them liking more and more if we fix them, right? So I feel like a lot of people are in that place where they're really scared because they don't know how they don't know first the problems that they're going to encounter, right? And then they don't know how to face those problems, and that uncertainty creates that confusion, and then they don't do it. But it's absolutely necessary if you want to serve your clients or audience.
It's this crazy idea that the customer, okay, I don't fully agree with the customer is always right, but I understand the ethos of that. The customer is what's paying your bills. The customer is the one who's going to keep opening up their wallet if you're producing content and services that are going to be valuable to them. They're going to stay in your world because you've over delivered. I wore the perfect shirt.
Yeah.
So by creating a show that's creating valuable content, bringing on experts that share great stuff, bringing in new cool resources that help them solve a problem, asking your people, having this two-way conversation, asking your people what they need help with, what they're struggling with, isn't shining light on your skeletons in your closet for your business. That's what a lot of people get scared about. It's instead the complete opposite. It's saying, hey guys, you're part of our movement. You're part of our community. Let's all turn our flashlights on and shine light into the spots that we can redecorate together. You're getting their feedback. They're helping build your business, and they
Yeah.
have that mental buy-in when you get that from them. And it's beautiful, all from live content.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you are one of the biggest masters of repurposing content. I have
Thank you.
like sometimes I will watch a core piece of your content and see the micro content you guys do off of that for the next like 2 or 3 weeks, and every time it hits me. I love it. So how do you what's the process in your brain that you go through after you create your core content, and how do you chop it up? How do you repurpose it? How do you pick what's worth it? Tell us about all your golden nuggets, all of that fun stuff.
All the secrets. Awesome. Yeah. So we started with like a hypothesis, right? Is that how you say it? Yeah. So we're like, okay, like out of the 45 live, right? We're like, okay, how can we leverage our time creating this, right? If I spend 10 minutes creating this piece, right? I did some research, or I told a story, right? That there has to be some value in it, right? That the value of the pieces, right? We call it golden boulders, right? So it's like, okay, what are the golden boulders inside of like this piece of content that we can share to the world, right? And the objective, this is very important. A lot of people come in like, okay, I need it for my followers. I need it for more followers. Well, when we're starting, there's no followers. That's the thing. Like we gotta build that, right? So okay, our first like thing that we thought about is like, okay, if we put as many pieces of content as possible, right, the algorithm is going to take care of that, right? It's going to take care of distribution. It's going to take care of like who sees what. But then what happens is we're going to have more opportunities to see what topics are resonating with people. So let's say, we can pick either Facebook or YouTube, doesn't matter. But let's say on YouTube, right, I publish twice a week. Those are two opportunities that we have to see what's resonating, right? If we publish 7 times a week, we have 7 opportunities to see what's resonating. Okay. So we're like, I don't have the time, or I don't want to create 7 different videos. Now, out of this one piece of content, right, that I create very strategically, right, I need 7 different sections. So you can pre-plan it, or you can do your thing and then on post-production take care of it, right? That's total personal preference, right? For us, how we did it is like, okay, we're investing this time in building this relationship with our guests, right? We're investing the time in doing the show. Our show is about an hour. Out of that, there's a lot of information that can be shared. So out of that information, we obviously ask questions related to what we do. So how to turn your content into profit. That is the main thing, right? Part of that is the multi-purposing of the content. That's what we do as a service, right? So, but on top of that, it's like, okay, these incredible guests, they have years of experience. So what are those pieces that we can select to do that? So how we do it is we call it M2M. That's our system, right? So we go from macro to micro content. Perfect. Like there's literally no side, like no, there's no secret. Is that from macro to micro assets? Now, how you decide to do this is like, okay, where do you want to be present, right? Are you somebody that wants to leverage TikTok? Are you somebody that wants to leverage Facebook with ads, right? Are you somebody that loves Instagram and love the visuals, and maybe you're a quote card person, right? At the end of the day, it's like, what do you feel comfortable? We have this concept called content umami, right? And umami is this Japanese concept where you eat and you're fully satisfied, but you're not like super full, right? You're like, oh, I ate the right amount. I don't feel bloated. I feel great. That's content. And so what is your content umami? Where is the content that you feel awesome sharing, that you're very proud of sharing, right? Whether that's yours, whether that's your guest, whether that's a quote card, whether that's very visual appealing, right? It's very subjective to your own preference, right? And we deal with every single one. We have people that are like, just put the piece of information there on a white background and we're good, right? There's other people that really want to highly produce very good looking thing, right? But at the end of the day, my good looking might be very different to your good looking, right? So at the end of the day, it's like, how do you recognize that? Now we create something that we call content map, right? From that content map, it's like, okay, what is the structure of these pieces? What are the ideas that we're selecting? What is the time of these ideas? Is this less than a minute? Is it more than a minute because of the different platforms? And once that map is set up, what we do is we design the whole map. So it's like, how is visually going to look like? Are we randomizing it? Are we, keep it very consistent over the time, right? What is it? How is it going to look visually? What is the call to actions? What do we want to drive people to? And what that's done, our personal map has about 20 pieces of content, right? So, okay, perfect. Now we do that 3 times a week, right? So now we know, okay, from this episode, we're going to actually grab 6, 7 ideas, right? That those 6, 7 ideas are divided in different types of content for different platforms. And then the distribution starts. That's where a lot of people get stuck, is on the distribution. They create it and then they're exhausted after creating all of this, and then they don't distribute it. So we actually had a very fun story with a client. He comes in and it's like, okay, I want as much content as possible. I'm like, okay, what's a perfect scenario? 50 pieces of content. I'm like, sounds good. Are you ready? Like, who do you have to distribute this? It's myself. I'm like, okay, here's how I recommend. Let's start a little bit smaller. Let's start like 10 pieces a week, right? This is the platforms that you use. No, I want 50. Okay, sounds good. So we deliver 50. And, we go on a call and we have a distribution call where it's like, hey, here's the fastest way to distribute this. For example, we distribute a full week worth of content that are more than 400 pieces or points of contact in different platforms. That's a month. So it's about 100 a month, 100 a week, sorry. How do we distribute that? In about an hour a week, right? So it's like, okay, we teach that so people can get their time back. So we go through this and like, here's where you put it. After a week, we get a call, like, guys, let's go back to the 10 pieces. So that's fine. And then we conquer the 10 pieces, and then we increase it to 20, and then we increase it to he increases his resources because he got more clients. We were able to hire a VA. So it evolves, right? So that's kind of how we do it. We get the macro, right? The macro is structured in a certain way, so our team knows where to pick those ideas. Those ideas are based off current problems in our marketplace, current solutions that our audience wants to hear right now. At the very beginning was just assumptions to test, and then we create those pieces and distribute. So that's in an essence. I hope it helped.
Micro content is something that is overwhelming to a lot of people on a good day. So it's nice to know that there's people who we can hand that off to. So Luis, thank you so much for being part of the show today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Molly.